Good evening. I'd like to call to order and determination of quorum for the Carson City Historic Resources Commission Thursday, July 9th, 2015 at 5:32 p.m.
Chairperson Block,
Here.
Vice Chair Drews, Commissioner Dickey,
Here.
Commissioner Hayes,
Here.
Commissioner Darney,
Here.
Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Spilda.
Here.
The quorum's present.
Great, thank you. On to item B, public comments. Members of the public who wish to address the commission may approach the podium at this time to speak on matters relevant to or within the authority of the Historic Resources Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, I'll move on to item C, action on approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item D, modification of agenda. Agenda management notice. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. The public body may combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and the public body may remove an item from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. Do we have any modification to the agenda?
No modifications, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Item E, disclosures. Any members of the commission that may wish to explain any contact with the public regarding an item on the agenda or business of the commission. Are there any disclosures? I'll disclose that on F2, I am the applicant, so I will be removing myself and being in front of the commission. And
Same for me on item F3. I'll be removing myself also.
okay, great. See no other comments. Now to item F, public hearing matters. F1, HRC 15-5054 for possible action to approve a request from Richard Whiffley, property owner, Pruitt Family Trust, in care of Marilyn Harper, to install a fence around properties on residential office RO located at 403 North Nevada Street, APN 003-225-04. Susan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Susan Pansky. As you stated, this is a request from Richard Whiffley to install a wrought iron fence around the Pruitt family property at 403 North Nevada. This property is located on the corner of North Nevada and West Telegraph, as shown in the aerial that I have on the screen now. And just a couple pictures of the property as it sits today. This is looking to the east at the front, and then looking to basically the northeast from the intersection. And these are the only two pictures that I've included because they're really the pictures that are applicable as it relates to where the fence is going to be going. As shown on the site plan that I have here, the fence is being proposed basically around the south side of the property, over onto the west side, which is the front, and then to the walkway. The type of fence is black wrought iron. It's going to be semi-gloss black paint. It's got round bar pickets and then standard pipe posts, 38 inches high, with the pickets being 35 inches high. This is similar, the applicant states, to fencing that this property owner has in other parts of the district, and this fence is in various parts of the district on other historic properties. Staff's recommending approval with the conditions outlined in the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, great. Mr. Whiffley, would you like to stand up and tell us anything about the project, or?
I agree with what Susan said. There's really, unless you have questions.
Is this the same fence that she has over to the southeast side of her property, the other where Rockin' and Rollin' and?
It would be the same one on that same block. It would be just to the east, correct?
Okay.
And that's kind of a stitchery store. And then it's also on
the west side?
Azevedo's, the law office next door.
Okay.
So it flanks on both sides, that same fence.
So it'll match. Any other questions, comments?
I think it's a nice fence.
Mr. Whiffley, so Paramount's going to construct it for you?
Paramount would do it, yeah.
They're going to do the installation and everything for you?
They would do everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they're the ones that did previous, I'm almost certain of.
their work is amazing.
Yeah, it is.
So it's not come from Lowe's or,
I might have to dig a couple holes, but other than that, that's
it'll
about
be
it.
one that you'll dig, I'm sure.
Any other comments? Like to entertain a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve HRC-15-054, request from Richard Whipley, property owner, Pruitt Family Trust, care of Marilyn Harper, to install an ornamental iron fence around property zoned residential office located at 403 North Nevada Street, APN 003-225-04, based on the findings and conditions of approval outlined in the staff report, the standards and guidelines for rehabilitation, the Carson City Historic District guidelines, and consistent with Historic Resources Commission policies.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Any public comment on the motion or the second or on the item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's nice seeing Susan back.
Nice to see you, Mr. Whiffley. Okay, so who wants to take over for the next item? Would that be? If the vice chair, but Rob would have been the most senior person on the board.
That sounds great. Cool. Pass that sucker down here.
Oh, you want the gavel?
See what kind of damage you can do. All those in favor of getting rid of Joe? Here we go again. Get rid of Jen again. All right, item F2, request for approval of HRC 15057, a request from Jed Block, property owner of Spear and Phillips LLC, to replace existing porch foundation with red brick on property zone single-family 6,000, located at 602 West Spear Street, based on the findings and conditions of approval outlined in the staff report, the standards and guidelines for rehabilitation, the Carson City Historic District guidelines, and with Historic Resource Commission policies. Jed, go ahead and introduce.
Do you want to introduce
I'll do
Susan?
it,
or-
yeah. So this is a request from Jed Block to replace the existing masonite material on his front porch at 602 West Spear Street with reclaimed brick from 1908. The subject parcel is located on the corner of Spear and Phillips. I know everyone is very familiar with the property. This is a picture of the property as it sits today, and you can see that Jed is in the process of redoing his front porch now, and has shown what the brick essentially would look like in the corner. You can see it sitting there underneath the porch. And just another picture from the side as well. And this is just impacting the front porch where this is where he's requesting that it be done. As I had indicated in the staff report, the product that was on the bottom of the porch initially was masonite, hardboard masonite, and I'm fairly certain that wasn't an original product to the house, since it wasn't being fabricated till the 1920s at the earliest in the United States. However, I can't say for certain what the original material actually was. The picture that he has given us in the upper left corner, what year is that, Jed? Do you know?
In the upper left is 1957.
Okay, so we don't have pictures from when it was originally built, so I couldn't say for sure. I don't know if it was brick. It could have been, of course, but what he's attempting to do here is use historic building materials to replace the masonite material that was there originally. So we are recommending approval, and I have a couple of conditions that I just wanted to go over and just clarify. Well, one in particular. On this picture, and it'll be better here. There's some wood supports there, and I wasn't sure if those were temporary or if they were intended to be permanent, But what I've done is I've requested that, or recommended a condition of approval stating that any wood supports for the porch, with the exception of the large supports, at the corners here and here and here, be behind the brick instead of in front of it, so it's a more authentic, straight brick look. And was that your intention? Okay,
Yes.
got it. So we're recommending approval, and I'll answer any questions if you have them.
You're going to add a little mortar to this? This is just a mock-up of the brick I'm looking at on the photo.
I wanted to try to give you a
you gonna do this?
visualization as best as I
Yeah.
could. Yes, there will be mortar in it, and it will be probably a high sand content to emulate the original limestone mortar in the house and not Portland cement.
Don?
I want to be careful with my comments, and I don't want them to be misconstrued, but since I've been sitting on this board, the one thing that, as I looked at the pictures and I drove by, it was really obvious that you started the work before you made your application.
Yes.
And the one comment that I have there is I've watched us have people come in here that didn't have to get permits, replace windows, and then they weren't in compliance with our standards, like the little lady from San Jose over her 5-month. And I just think it's important that us as the commission, and you know where I'm going.
Oh, absolutely, and I agree with you.
We can't do these types of things. We're supposed to be setting the example, and when our chairman starts the work and then does the application, I just hope that in the future we wouldn't do stuff like this, because that's the only heartburn I've got with this whole thing.
Oh, well, you're absolutely right, and here's, Mr. Whiffley was in my head when I started this, and of course, when the aluminum siding got pulled off the front and you could see the original shiplap, well, you look down and there was this great plywood that they put on. It was painted gray and green, and there was a little metal track where the aluminum was, and I started pulling that down, and I saw, wow, there's these 5-inch tongue and groove boards. Wow, that looks pretty good. So I pull off not the end piece, but the second one in. These boards look really good. And then it was like my wife saying, are we going to be able to use the porch this year? Sure, not a problem. And then we pulled off another piece, and what was really interesting is they had masonite up the front, and they had sheet metal down on the bottom where they put it down in front of the sandstone. You can barely see it underneath the bricks. That's all sandstone. They poured a little footing. And so then you have this thing, and it had quite an elaborate sheet metal structure bent up around that went 8 inches under the plywood. And then they had some kind of, it looked like aluminum foil. It almost looked like a spacesuit put on there to do this stuff. And then, so the plywood came up, and the center post had been a little bit falling, and Mr. Whiffley, follow the rot. Well, it can't be that rotted. I mean, come on, it's standing up there. So under the front part, I got underneath there, and it was a 6x6 that went that whole direction. And where that center post came down, it was rotted out this about 16 inches and 4 inches down, and they had shoved a 2x6 piece in there, probably between 57 and the early 60s, and they had used this gray mastic, and they did that, and the board happened to be rotted out another 8 inches either side on the inside, and everything was stacked on the sandstone foundation, and we had cinder blocks in the corners, so everything was stacked on there. And I started this as a basic remodel. You never know how much rot's in there, and I went, wow, these boards are pretty bad, so I better order the same style wood, which is Doug fir, tongue and groove, 5 inches, which would emulate where the old stairs were and everything inside. And as you can imagine, and as you've seen, I'm having to not get a building permit because it's less than 30 inches tall, but there's also an element of changing the outside where I thought, well, changing the look of the outside, I can put masonite back there and paint it and nothing, but I want to do this brick. So therefore, I'm coming to you to ask for permission because we know that there's a lot of things, like you said in Ms. Summers' place, that you don't need a permit, but you do need permission. So, if you want me to be more careful about when following rot and not needing a permit, that's where I'm just explaining this to you. So this process, so as many of you know, when you start with a simple repair, then all of a sudden it's a major undertaking, and do you need a permit or you don't need a permit? And I met with Sean Sean Keating at the building department, and so we went over, and so he really educated me on what the code was, and
Right. What I was talking about was not whether we need a permit or any of those. It's just that we know what the rules are here, that when we start to change materials, or we have the idea that we want to change a material or alter a house within the historic district or an office, just like coming here on the fence today with Dick, he doesn't need a permit for that fence because it's less than 7 feet high.
Nobody needs permission from the,
He has to have our approval. And
Sure.
I go back to the lady from San Jose. She didn't need a building permit. She wasn't aware that she had to come to us. But we are aware of those rules. And I just want us as a commission and a board to be above scrutiny from people on the outside. And you're a very visible guy. I mean,
absolutely.
you know, you really, I mean, you can go back to when I think the first Native American came over the hill and settled here. I mean, I'm amazed with your knowledge. But I just want to see us as a board, you know, set that standard and make sure that we don't have to either put our staff in a bad position, yourself in a bad position, or me, so.
Well, and I do appreciate your comments, and as like I said, you know, it started off, I'll pull off this ugly plywood and we'll sand it down and revarnish, you know, the wishful thinking thing, but that's why I'm in front, and you know, I was trying to figure out what to do with the face of that, and when they did this wonderful recreation as an apartment building in 1954, it was 5/16 lath, or
How do you know this stuff?
I found details in there. I just dug the details out. Where you see to the left where the mudroom is, the deck ends there, and underneath there, they poured a footing right up against where the lattice is in between. So that was the only piece of lattice that was left. What we did with this, what was amazing, the sandstone that you see on the front is put on a rubble foundation, if you will. It's just one piece of sandstone. Some of them vary between 4 and 8 inches thick, and it's still level. And so with talking with Sean, we poured a footing behind it, and everything is anchored with pressure-treated wood on top of that new footing. And we're also going to put vents in it because the basement or the crawl space has never been vented in the piece. And so, you know, before I went any farther with mortar or anything like that, and I stacked them up and to put them on there so there would be a little bit, people could visualize it. And Susan, on the south side there where the 2 boards are, the top tongue and groove is cantilevered over, so we just put that on there just to hold it up until the brickwork's done. And so,
Mike, you got a comment?
Yeah, not to dogpile on you, Jed, but I think Don's point's very well taken. If any of us had walked by any other house in the district and saw this work going on, we would have called Susan, or a resident of the district would have called. And it's just, it just makes it a whole lot cleaner if all of us especially remember, hey, we got to set the example and
okay, well,
bring it before I mean, we don't need to discuss anymore, Jed.
Well, here's my
What's happened has happened, and it's just a caution, you know, for those of us in the district, for those doing work in the district, that, hey, we're high profile and we need to make sure that our butts are covered too.
Let me add one more thing to it, kind of the devil's advocate here. There's a certain amount here that, being that you're doing this as a repair, rather than it's not an addition, it's not a change, it's not a modification, it's a repair, which can't really be facilitated until you actually find out what the damage is. So there is, on these projects, a certain amount of exploration necessary that needs to occur before they come to us, because they have to propose a fix to us. And without knowing what's wrong, how is that possible?
I would say if you're contemplating it, take it to the commission first. If there's not enough information,
As a non,
you can, I mean,
as a non-item
Yeah.
discussion.
yeah, I mean, let's see what it takes. But I mean, I just would be really reluctant if I was living in the district to start a project without, you know.
Let me bring up a,
To be perfectly honest, if I was in the district, I wouldn't even go for an administrative approval. I would always take it to the full board, because I don't want it to look like there's any favoritism. I do have a
let
question.
me ask you a question, Mike.
I do have a
while
question.
We're talking about it.
Okay.
Just one. If it was simply a repair, and he was replacing some of the spindles with like, replacing that masonite with like, that type of thing, would it even be necessary to come before us?
I would take it to the commission and say I'm doing an in-kind replacement and let it go from there administratively or however.
How's the city see that? I guess that's more of a building department question, isn't it?
No, it falls under historic resources, and I'd say if it's in kind and it's a repair, we do have language in the code that allows for that without coming forward. I think where Commissioner Drews and Commissioner Smith are going is probably more related to that it just kind of looks bad that the brick is there, even though it was obviously your intention to just show this is what I intend for it to look like. It just can be perceived potentially as you starting this project without, because clearly from your description, you were repairing, going through all those other things when you were pulling the masonite off and everything like that. At that point, you probably didn't know if you were gonna put the same material back or not. So I would say if it is a replacement in kind, it's not an issue unless you're doing a re-roof and you're redoing the whole entire thing, then we still want to see
So
it.
we're probably talking about administrative.
So let me,
No, I just have one more comment, because I want to talk to Rob's, and then, and really to follow up on Susan, it's perception. It's not to pick on you if it was me, but the one thing I want to say is, where I have to disagree with Rob just a little bit, is the lady that was replacing her windows. She did not have to have a permit for that. We discussed that. She was putting the windows in, which is a repair. I'm taking out a window.
Yeah, but she was replacing with something different.
Okay, but still, there was no reason to go for a permit. She lives in San Jose. She didn't even know we exist. And we kind of gave her a bad time when she was here. And she was doing nothing wrong. So I think I'm just talking about perception. I want us to be above that, That's all I want for us.
okay, well, let me.
I think, Jed, what he's talking about is that like we just did with
No, I understand. I know
everybody
exactly
down the
what
street
you're saying.
with the foundation.
Well, here's
So
what
it's
I would
sorta-
like to say, and this would be good. This is just a perfect, good teaching example for anybody that's viewing this, for anybody that lives in the historic district, and whether I'm the chair or not, your points are well taken. Now, what we're looking at is if somebody is in the district, and when they look at the policies and procedures, if they're changing the outward appearance, but I'm not. That's kind of like the Vivian, the lady from San Jose and all that stuff. So what you're saying is when somebody has a historic home in the district, that it would be just out of courtesy, not just me as the chairman of this commission, to say, hey, I'm going to embark on rebuilding my front porches. And when this project started, it was probably going to be $300 or $400 for paint and labor and stuff like that for me to do it. Well, as you can see here, $10,000 later, here's where we are, and it's all like materials except for the addition of the brick, which nothing's been done, and that can all go away. Is it the pleasure of this commission to want to talk to people before they start any kind of project? Because as I see in here, I see one pillar going down, and now I look at every porch in the district that's kind of leaning. And I'm looking at, oh boy, I know how much rot was in mine, it's going to be in all this stuff.
I think when the change is going to occur on a property, historic property, and if the porch is one of the character defining features of a building. And so a lot can go wrong when people start doing repairs that aren't savvy to what probably they need to put back, or they'll try to add more gingerbread to it, make it cuter. And if you're not changing original materials, which you weren't, you're taking off the masonite, that's not an original material, so that gives you a little latitude. But then coming to us to see what kind of material you should put back that would be more in keeping would be a good discussion. So maybe that's where we would like to see it.
Because they use red brick in all the chimneys and everything, and my first idea for red brick was to try to get some of the bricks that came out of Carson Jewelry and Loan when they did that remodel, so it was native.
So Jed, my question is, you think there was lattice there before, is that correct?
I can guarantee it. We can take a flashlight underneath.
So why aren't you replacing with lattice? Why are you?
I wanted something
Why
that was,
why have you decided to change to a different material for them?
one word, maintenance. I mean, plain and simple, the brick is going to need relatively little maintenance in the next 100 years, where lattice is probably going to have to be repainted every 3 to 5 on a good year. The lattice that was underneath there is 5/16